Fall is in full swing, and I feel like we should just call it what it is, the season of the squash. There are so many to choose from. There are so many beautiful ways to prepare lovingly your sweet, meaty, vegetarian friendly, because it's a vegetable, squash. And while there are tons of gorgeous and rustic ways to prepare squash, you can roast it, you can slow cook it, you can braise it, I'm gonna show you one of my personal favorite ways to enjoy butternut squash today. It is a savory butternut squash layer cake, meaning I'm gonna take really thin slices, like half moons of the butternut squash neck, slice it really thin and layer it in this beautiful flower petal pattern in a springform cake pan, which looks like this. And out comes the most intensely fragrant golden brown, melt in your mouth layers of butternut squash with caramelized onions and Fresno chilies and a little crunch from Panko breadcrumb. And I'm gonna put a little Parmesan cheese on there too. And I just think it's gonna blow your mind. We are gonna start actually not with the squash, we're gonna start with some caramelized onions. So I'm gonna use 2 sweet onions, yellow onions. I have made this recipe many different ways. You can slice your onions, you can dice them. I like dicing them because I feel like they scatter better between the layers of butternut squash. So that's what I'm gonna do. Although butternut squash is the hero of this dish, and it's naturally very sweet on its own, I find that adding the additional layer of sweet caramelized onion just gives it this like very rich buttery moment with tons of great savory flavor, of course, and gives a little nuance to the layers of butternut squash, which you will appreciate. And then the best part is that the party doesn't stop there, because I add Fresno chilies, which give a really nice spice to the mix. So it's a little sweet, it's savory, as I'm about to start crying, I just have to say, I do think onions make almost every savory dish better. And that is why I'm using 2 of them. But if you want to take it down a notch, you can go to just 1. However, I will say that once you go through, so emotional in here. I will say that once you go through the trouble of making caramelized onion, because you really don't want to cheat the process, you want to give it at least 20 minutes, 30, 40 if you have the time, to get that golden brown richness. And it builds the flavor, it concentrates the sweetness, all the sugars sort of come to the surface and turn that golden brown color, and it does take some time. So you might as well make as many onions as you have that you'd like to turn into caramelized wonders. And then you can always freeze them and add them into soups and stews and braises and all the other fun fall things you'll be cooking up this season. Now that I have all my onions lovely and minced, gather them together, and we are gonna drop them into a pot with a little splash of olive oil and just let them cook down. Come on over. Just a splash of olive oil. We want them to really bring all those sugars to the surface and give us max color and max flavor. Give them a little stir, just to coat in that oil. And then we're really just gonna let them hang out here. We'll stir every couple minutes or so. You can add a little splash of liquid, sometimes maybe a little water, just to make sure nothing is burning or sticking to the base of your pan. You'll see I'm not gonna salt until maybe 10, 15 minutes into the cooking process. The salt actually releases like a second batch of water. I wanted to let the first bit of water to come out on its own, evaporate away, and then the salt will release the next bit of water, and that just further brings us to the apex of caramelization and flavor. So truly the only complicated part of this entire recipe, which will look very complicated, when you put this on the table, people will be like, oh, how'd you do that? There is nothing complicated at all, save for patience and either good knife skills or fearlessness with a mandolin. Since I do not have the latter, like literally I'm not fearless around it, but I also can't find my mandolin, I am going to use my knife to thinly slice just the neck of the butternut squash, so the part up until the ball here. And that's gonna give us the firmest, meatiest flesh. It also will cook evenly, and it will layer evenly, which is what we're after. But it does just require some supreme patience, and you're gonna cut like roughly 1/8 inch thick slices, so like this. A little bit on the flexible side. And if you make it a little thicker like this, I won't fail you. It's okay. Okay. Into a bowl. And we're gonna do this for a long time. All the way through 4 halves of butternut squash. Ultimately, this recipe uses about 2 medium butternut squash, or roughly 6 pounds of squash, which is great because I feel like we eat squash all season long. These were pretty enormous squash, so maybe I need one more half of one. All right, we're getting there. And like I said, you kind of want to take it to the edge of the bowl. And these you can roast and serve with a little tahini and honey or maple and a little walnut action. Candied pecans, delightful. However you like. Our squash is ready to go. Let's check on our onions. Ooh, nice little golden browning situation starting to happen. They are translucent, and you can see the bottom's really nice and dry. There's not a ton of oil sitting around down there. If it gets too dry, which this is just on the cusp of, I'm gonna add just a splash of water in here, just to make sure that nothing is sticking at the bottom. The ideal with caramelized onions is you wanna go low and slow. Like in a perfect world, I would go medium low on these for like an hour. So we're going medium high for half an hour. I'm ready to salt. Start with like a teaspoon, I would say. Now we can start on the fresno and the sage. Is it even a fall dish if there isn't sage? I feel like it is the quintessential Thanksgiving turkey flavor, but we forget to use it as often as we should, and it is the most immediate, like, oh, I'm in the months that end in R. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna grab some sage, the scent of fall. I'm pulling off, call it 30 leaves, 2 tablespoons of sage leaves. And I'm just gonna give them a lovely thin slice. So I'll just stack the leaves up kind of like as though you're rolling a cigar. Gather them all together and then work your blade. Take your time. Set those to the side and we will work on our Fresno chili. But Fresnos have this very kind of, instead of the very sort of green, herby flavor that jalapenos can have, Fresnos are red jalapenos, and something about them has just like a much fruitier taste to it. It's a little bit sweeter and a little bit richer, I think. So I think it goes great in this very decadent tasting, even while remaining fairly light meal that we are making. And I'm just gonna put a nice little tight mince on here. I'm not gonna remove any of the seeds because I like it spicy, but if you want it a little less spicy, take out the ribs and the seeds of 1/2. If you like it really pretty mild, take out all the seeds. Otherwise, do as I do. And last but not least, some garlic. Do this at your discretion. I'm gonna use 4 cloves. Give them a quick pop out of their skins. And then you do kind of wanna mince these decently finely so that they scatter. Again, you want these to layer in between every layer of butternut squash and infuse that great flavor into every bite. Just give them an initial rough chop like this, and then we're gonna come back through. Follow me. Here we go. Whee! Now the trick with garlic is you actually don't want it on too hot of a surface directly because it will burn. So you want to really quickly mix it together with the onions so that it has almost like a protective barrier. And then we're just going to toast it here maybe a minute or so just until it's really fragrant. And then we're going to set this off to the side and let it cool slightly before we start assembling our layer cake. Oh, guys, it smells so good. Don't forget that you just chopped a hot chili. Do wash your hands before you touch anything. Even though this pot is literally nothing but onions, I also like to add a little onion powder because it almost cooks differently. It's like, I don't know, it's like a very concentrated onion flavor. It's sweet and it just builds and carries the onion flavor even further. So I will add maybe a teaspoon, 1 to 2 teaspoons of onion powder right over our mix here. And if it needs just a tiny touch more olive oil to help toast that spice addition, that is okay. Look at these colors, the beautiful sage, the Fresnos, the deeply golden brown onion. I mean, that by itself with pasta, like so delicious. We're happy. In an omelet. All right, next up, we are going to prepare our springform pan, meaning a pan that has a bottom that releases and goes back in. And the reason that is important is because otherwise you will have to do an upside down version of this if you want to make it just in a regular cake tin, which is not the end of the world, it's fine, but it's just not quite as fail-proof to nail a truly magnificent presentation. So the way we're going to prep our pan to make it maximally easy to release is just spray the bottom down with a little just olive oil cooking spray. I don't know why I just did the bottom. You don't need to do the bottom. And you can totally do the base with tin foil. I just prefer to use the parchment paper if I can, so pinch it in there so it doesn't move around. And then we're gonna grease a little bit on top again. And now we start to layer. So there's no flavoring right now on our actual wheels of butternut squash, which is fine because we will be adding delicious flavor with the caramelized onions. And we will be seasoning each layer as we go with a little spray of olive oil, a little salt, and a little Parmesan cheese. So there will be delicious flavor coming throughout. All right, come see how I'm building this floral pattern here. So I started with the outer layer of butternut squash here, and now I'm just continuing to build these sort of concentric circles to make sure I have a complete bottom layer here is important because obviously this is the base of your cake. And you don't want it to get too thick because you want everything to cook evenly. And then once your bottom layer is ready, give it a little spray, a little hit of salt, and then grab a couple tablespoons of our delicious caramelized onion layer and just scatter that over the surface of your squash. And this is an effort in moderation. You may be tempted to add buckets of this mixture in each layer, but in order to have it cook evenly and to make sure that there is flavor in every bite, it's really about the layering of every different element of the dish. And we are gonna go at least 4, maybe 5, and quite possibly 6 layers of butternut squash. A little sprinkle of Parmesan cheese for that salty, creamy hit, and on to the next layer. Okay, so that was 2 layers. Come back in a few minutes. Okay, so I finished my layers. I think I got 5 in there. I don't know how, maybe I overstacked it a little bit, but, or my slices weren't as precise as they should be, but it will still be delicious. A little more olive oil on top, and I finished with a layer of butternut squash so that you have this like sealed in little dome flour. And then you just season it off with a little salt, cover it with a little tin foil at this point, just loosely tenting to make sure that this has time to fully roast and for the squash to get nice and rich and tender without burning the top. And you'll see we're gonna finish with a broil that really gives you that golden brown glory moment. Get a pan, unless you are a fan of cleaning up more than you need to, and just slip right on top and into a 375-degree oven. This is gonna go 40 minutes, 45, 50, we'll test. You want it tender, like to give gently when you put a fork into it or a knife, but not so soft that it's mush because the squash will continue to cook even after it comes out of the oven. Let's pop her in. Night, night. Okay, so our savory layers of butternut squash have been in the oven now 50 minutes or so. We're gonna take them out and test. Oh, and this is why, come on this side and you can see the bubbling situation happening here. And that is why you cook on a baking sheet. Let's see what's going on under there. Ooh, pretty. Looking buttery, looking gorgeous. Let's go down, see what we're working with. Nice and tender. Not too tender though, we don't want mush. We want nice firm texture and to have it be delicious. We're gonna let this cool like 10 minutes while we make a toasted panko topping. Then we will put the toasted panko on top and tuck this little cake underneath the broiler for a couple minutes so it gets really golden brown and toasty, and then it will be time to taste. To toast the panko breadcrumbs, we're going to use a little butter. We're gonna use a little panko, and we are gonna cook it just over a medium flame till it gets really golden brown. The butter starts to give it that extra buttery golden goodness, and everybody's happy. I'm gonna do a tablespoon of butter to start. Maybe a tablespoon and a half of butter. And I'm gonna set that over a medium flame and just let that start to melt. Let some of those milk solids start to caramelize and turn brown. And meanwhile, grab ourselves some breadcrumbs. I'm using panko breadcrumbs because they're a nice kind of nubbly texture. Means there's lots of surface area to soak up the golden goodness from the butter. And this will be like our nice little crumbly, crunchy topping. As you can see, I'm not really measuring precisely here. I kind of am just going by what I think I need. Sometimes I add the butter as the primary flavoring agent, and then I'll just add a tiny splash of olive oil to help prevent the butter from burning and to continue to give us that nice golden brown crispness on the breadcrumbs. And watch them turn from this sort of pale white color here to a golden brown perfection in a matter of minutes. And you can totally do this in the oven also, by the way, but I find it's faster on the stove. You want to toss it maybe every 30 seconds or so to make sure that it's all getting golden brown. We're going to toss the breadcrumbs together with some more Parmesan and then scatter it all over the top of your butternut squash. So don't worry if your flour pattern wasn't perfect. This is a beautiful mask. It covers all errors and makes it more delicious. It's perfect. This is a fun game I like to play called Panko Roulette. It might all end up on the floor. Oh, look at that. Okay, now that the squash has cooled somewhat and I can handle the pan, now is the moment of truth where you have to remove this outer ring of the springform pan to separate the cake. There are some real moments of jeopardy in this recipe, I'm not gonna lie. But hopefully luck is on our side and all the greasing that we did helps it easily release. I'm not gonna lie, so far I'm very happy with this whole situation. We are in good tip-top shape right now. Grab a little more of your Parmesan cheese, which you should ideally freshly grate yourself unless you are running short on time, and then buying it store-bought is totally fine. But grating it fresh just releases the most flavor. And then sprinkle your buttery, delightful panko breadcrumbs right on top. And now this goes back in the oven under the broiler, 2 to 3 minutes. Don't you dare take a phone call. Don't you walk away from the oven because all your work will have been for nothing. It just needs a little moment to get golden brown and crisp on the top. 2 minutes. Oh yeah. Oh, whoa. Oh my gosh. Just come take a gander at what we did together. Look at this beautiful girl. I predict happiness in our future, but we have to wait. Again, moments of jeopardy in this recipe. Number 1, slice the squash nice and thin. Number 2, release the springform pan. And number 3, patiently wait for your butternut squash cake to cool before you slice it, or it won't hold together. I'm gonna be very honest with you, which is that I don't have another 10 minutes to wait to let this cool completely, so we're gonna just tempt fate and slice into it before it is entirely cool. And I will just preemptively say that if you let it cool completely, it will hold together much better. So I am anticipating a little slippage here, but no detraction from how delicious it will be. I very delicately removed the cake from the springform pan and I just slid it onto my serving plate using the parchment paper. If you use tinfoil on the base of the springform, it's a little bit easier to slide it off and it doesn't collect the moisture, so it pulls a little easier, but it doesn't really matter, people. Although I should say, it's gorgeous, and if you're gonna serve it at Thanksgiving, because this makes a truly tremendous side dish or vegetarian main, then you're gonna make it on the tinfoil and just have it really make your life easier. Let's cut in to our butternut squash cake. It's good sound effects for sure. Oh yeah. Ah, look at this layer upon layer of goodness. Your butternut squash, your caramelized onions, your fresno chili, your crispy, crunchy breadcrumbs. Look inside here for a second. Look at the layers of flavor going on in this all, well, mostly veggie blend. All right, let's taste, shall we? We worked hard enough for this thing, huh? Oh, I see sage coming my way. I see melty, cheesy tendrils. Bon appetit. Mmm. Mmm. Guys, the way the butternut squash stays so silky and tender, like the word lace keeps coming to my mind. Like, how often is squash described as lacy? Never. There's not a whole lot more that you are gonna get from watching me continue to devour this plate with all of its cheesy tendrils and crunchy goodness and bits and bobs. But I'm so glad you were here, and I can't wait for you to make it. Enjoy.